Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. We acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their elders past and present. I would like to advise everyone that the audio of this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. I request everyone to please turn off your mobile phones. I remind you that any recording of the meeting proceedings and photography within the chamber is prohibited unless prior approval has been granted, and councillors and city officers are reminded to disclose any declarations of financial interests or interests affecting impartiality and are requested to activate their microphones when addressing the meeting. So, with that, welcome. Item 1 is the declaration of opening, and I declare this meeting open at 1 minute past 6 p.m. Item 2 is a disclaimer. The City of South Perth disclaims any liability for any loss arising from any person or body relying on any statement, discussion, recommendation or decision made during this meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the presiding member, that's me. And on behalf of Council, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate our Director of Development and Community Services, Ms Donna Shaw, for recently receiving the Troy Pickard Young Achievers Award at the WALGA 2024 Local Government Awards. This award recognises the contributions and commitment to local government by elected members or employees in the sector aged 35 years or under. Councillors, please join me in congratulating Director Shaw. Item 4 is attendances. Item 4.1 is apologies, and I have received an apology from Councillor Glenn Cridland for this evening. Item 4.2 is approved leaves of absence, of which there are nil this evening. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Bear with me because there's a few. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.1.1 as I have a family member who is a member of Collier Pines Ladies Golf Club and plays at Collier Park Golf Club. Mayor Greg Milner, that's me. I've declared a financial, proximity and impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as some of the proposed listings either include or are adjacent to or are across the road from properties that are owned or indirectly owned by persons who contributed to my re-election campaign in 2023. Councillor Hayley Prendeville has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as one of the nominated persons for the local heritage survey review is known to me as a neighbour. I was a guest at a dinner at Wesley College recently and my children attend Kensington Primary School. Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as some of the heritage places listed in the draft local heritage survey for advertising are known to me by past or present association, and some of the landholders or residents of some of the heritage places listed in the draft local heritage survey for advertising are or may also have been known to me. Councillor Bronwyn Moore has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as my son attends Wesley College. Councillor Andre Brandis has declared an impartiality interest in item 10.3.1 as I know of someone who is not a closely associated person to me and their property is on the heritage survey. And Councillor Mary Choi has declared an impartiality interest in item 12.1 as my family has a current and past affiliation with Wesley College, who have a development application pending approval with the relevant state government department for redevelopment of their rowing shed on the South Perth foreshore, near or adjacent to the proposed Node 2 Coode Street concept plan area. Councillors, does anyone else have any declarations that they'd like to make this evening? I'm going to take that as a no. Okay, moving on. Item 6 is public question time. Item 6.1 is responses to previous public questions taken on notice. That's nil. Item 6.2 is public question time itself. So I'll now open public question time at 5 minutes past 6 p.m. We've received 4 written submissions prior to tonight's meeting, and I'd like to begin by inviting Mr. Barry Drake of South Perth. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome, and we look forward to your questions.
My name's Barry Drake. I live at Unit 3, Number 2, Scenic Crescent, South Perth. Good evening, Mr Mayor, good evening, councillors, officers, members of the gallery, and good evening to everybody out there on YouTube listening. My questions this month relate to an item that the council voted on last year with respect to the sporting fields at Sir James Mitchell Park that Wesley College want to set up. Question 1. Wesley College has the largest sporting grounds of any private school in the city of South Perth. With that in mind, why do they also need Sir James Mitchell Park?
Thank you for the question. Mr. Adams.
So Wesley has indicated that it has a need for greater access to sporting fields. So we undertook to have a look at how that could be accommodated.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Your second question, Mr. Drake?
Question number 2. When there is an item on the agenda for discussion at any ordinary council meeting regarding Wesley College, how many councillors declare an interest?
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
So as you would have heard just now, there's a number of people that have declared interest tonight. It depends on what the item is and which councillors are in the room at the time. With regard to any of the items that have happened in the past, you can have a look at the minutes and that'll show you exactly who's declared an interest for those particular items and who hasn't.
So that would just about be all the councillors, I should imagine.
That's not the case, Mr. Drake, but Mr. Adams has answered that question.
Very close to all the councillors, Mr. Mayor.
Still not sure that's correct, but please ask your third question.
Question number 3. Have any of the councillors ever voted on items which they have declared an interest in?
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Yes, councillors are able to vote on items where they've declared an impartiality interest. The only times they can't vote is when they've declared a financial interest or a proximity interest. So there would be many occasions where councillors vote when they've declared impartiality interests.
So they're all impartiality interests, I'd take it.
Well, as Mr. Adams just said, Mr. Drake, councillors are entitled to vote if they've declared an impartiality interest. They're not entitled to vote if they've declared a financial or a proximity interest.
But of course they won't declare a financial interest, will they?
Mr. Drake, we've been through this a number of times together. This isn't an opportunity to talk back or debate issues. You get to ask your questions, but that's all that public question time is relevant for. You've asked your questions, thank you very much. And I'll now call up the next person, who is Mr. John Bassett of Como. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I'll break my preamble up into 2, so it better fits with the 2 questions. The first, in relation to the first question, on the 26th of March council meeting, I asked the status of the urban forest strategy. The response was that council was to engage in stakeholder consultation. And so several months later, what is the status of the review of the urban forest strategy and the stated consultation process?
Thank you for the question. Ms Amprimo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So today, officers have provided council with 2 briefings on the urban greening strategy. One was in June 2023 and the most recent one was in August of this year. Officers have also undertaken a literature review. They've developed the scope of the strategy. They've developed the stakeholder engagement plan and appointed a consultant for the engagement. They've prepared the material for the engagement process and continue to participate in professional technical forums that will support and inform the development. Future activities that are programmed is the broad community engagement, which is scheduled for September and October. formation of a panel to consider the key elements of the strategy made up of members of the community, of key stakeholder groups and the broader community will be established, and the draft strategy will be released for public comment. It's estimated in around May or June of next year.
Thank you, Ms Zamprima. And your second question, Mr Bassett?
Thank you. Ms Zamprima, in responding to the question, you provided details of Council's ongoing planting. Those details were in part external funding of some $77,000 for an urban greening grant, which should plant 594 trees over the winter planting season. $602,000 from the DBCA Urban Forest Program, which is implemented over 2024 to 26. The Bill Graydon Reserve with a planting of 240 trees and an annual street planting of approximately 1,000 trees. And so 6 months later, how many of these programs have been implemented and to what degree?
Thank you. Ms Zamprima?
So thank you, Mr Mayor. We're currently now in the planting season. So the trees from the Urban Greening Grants Programme and the annual winter planting programme are substantially complete and underway. The reshaping of the existing drainage ditch that will be converted into the Hurlingham Living Stream is scheduled for early next calendar year in preparation for next year's planting season. And the second stage will be undertaken during 2026. These timeframes are consistent with the original grant application and approval, and the Bill Graydon Reserve project is complete.
Thank you, Ms Zamprima, and thank you, Mr Bassett, for your questions. I'd now like to invite Dr Mark Brogan of Kensington. If you'd like to come to the microphone, welcome to you, and we look forward to your questions.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors. My questions this evening concern the city's waste to energy program. In a 5 July posting to My South Perth magazine entitled "Your Waste Will Not Go to Waste," City of South Perth said, and I quote, "The city is moving to more sustainable waste management solutions. That's why we're committed to diverting everything that ends up in your green lid bin away from landfills and transforming it into a valuable source of renewable energy." This seems to me to be a novel and wrong use of the term renewable energy. Renewable energy comes from natural sources such as wind or solar power, which are not depleted when used. Renewable energy is also clean energy involving no greenhouse gas emissions in its production other than embedded CO2 contained in plant. My questions are, would the city explain why it considers its waste to energy program to be an example of renewable energy when this is not supported by the scientific use of the term?
Thank you for the question. Ms Zamprima?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the Australian Renewable Energy Agency defines energy from waste as, and I quote, bioenergy in a form of renewable energy generated from the conversion of biomass into heat, electricity, biogas and liquid fuels. Biomass is organic matter derived from forestry, agriculture or waste streams available on a renewable basis. It can also include combustible components of municipal solid waste. AREA specifically provided $23 million in funding to the Kwinana Waste to Energy project and recognises that, and I quote again, the Kwinana Energy Recovery Facility is an important and significant renewable energy project for Western Australia and Australia. It will be the first thermal utility-scale energy recovery facility constructed in the nation, diverting approximately 25% of Perth's post-recycling rubbish from landfill sites.
My second question, review of the literature also shows that these projects are significant emitters of greenhouse gases. So I ask tonight, what are the projected annual aggregated and City of South Perth greenhouse gas emissions from burning of waste at the Avertis Kwinana facility pursuant to its contractual agreement with the city?
Thank you for the question. Ms Zamprima?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A life cycle greenhouse gas assessment for the project estimated that potential net reduction in overall carbon emissions will be 400,000 tonnes of CO2 per year, noting that this study is based on the original licence capacity of the plant. This independent assessment factors in reductions in landfill gas emissions and other offsets. based on the City of South Perth diverting 13,300 tonnes of waste to energy recovery, the city would be reducing CO2 emissions by 13,300 tonnes per year.
My third question concerns the delivery of this project. In July 2023, it was reported that due to construction and other project delays, the Kwinana facility was not now expected to be operational until December 2025, effectively 10 years after the contract was announced. Does the city agree that there has been a significant contractual failure on the part of the contractor with this contract? And what is it proposing to do about the contract if it is not delivered in 2024-25?
Thank you. Ms Ampremo.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The contract has been administered by the Rivers Regional Council as the principal of the contract in accordance with the provisions contained in that contract. Whilst the delay in completion of the project is disappointing, there have been multiple contributing factors and the contractor is not in default. Given the plant is currently in commissioning phase, the city believes it to be low risk that the plant will not be fully operational during the 24-25 financial year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo, and thank you, Dr Brogan, for the questions. I'd now like to invite Mr Andrew Sombathy, I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly there. Oh, excellent. Of Maida Vale. Welcome. Please come to the microphone and we look forward to your questions.
Evening Chamber. My name is Andrew Sombathy from Maida Vale. I'm the son of the owner of property 91 Coode Street. That's what my preamble's for. The South Perth Council Heritage Classification on 91 Coode Street, South Perth. We'd like to look into the factor of either it being removed or better explained as to the reasoning. This is highly because of the factor that the information pertained against it and its heritage ideas are incorrect. So my first question is wanting to identify the factor of whom applied the classification and why it was never correctly followed up as per the Landgate registered owner.
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In February 2024, the City wrote to owners of properties on the existing local heritage inventory, requesting whether they had any additional information that would assist in informing the draft local heritage survey. The City liaised with the registered owner, who had no objections or no new information to include. The property is currently a Category B place on the local heritage inventory, which the City is seeking to retain under the draft local heritage survey as the equivalent management Category 2. So it's effectively transferring over from the existing inventory and the listing remains the same under the draft local heritage survey.
Okay. I don't know if I can question anything against that, but irrespective, just leading to the factor of the letter being sent out back in early 2024. Now, at the end of the day, the feedback on that, whether it was objected or not objected, to the knowledge of my father.
Sorry, Mr Sombathy, I've got to be fair to everyone.
Yep, fair play.
I appreciate you've got views on this and please do feel free to, if you haven't already emailed the elected members, but
Yep.
I do need you to move on to the second question.
Yep, rightio. So who compiled the information recorded against the property's history and why is the actual owner history not mentioned?
Thank you. Ms Shaw?
The information in the place record is consistent with the original Municipal Heritage Inventory compiled in 2005, which was prepared by the consultants Heritage Today. A review of this document was undertaken by Hocking Heritage Studio and Creating Communities in 2017, which resulted in the current 2018 Local Heritage Inventory, which also received input from the City of South Perth Historical Society. The landowner was invited to comment on the draft place records in both 2005 and 2017, and the property was also inspected through this process. Council subsequently adopted the recommendation. No changes are proposed to the place record in the draft local heritage survey, other than updates to the management category terminology as per the local heritage survey guidelines.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. And your third question, Mr Sombathy?
Yeah, maybe I'll get an answer out of this one then. So why are we having to find out about the information about this heritage listing being applied against the property from a Google search? We've been in the process of trying to sort out a split on the property as per the title and nothing is listed on this. So my question is, if I was to demolish an affecting part of the building, which does not technically require Shire approval as it's not a new build, only the removal of an outbuilding added in the 70s, then what would the fine be that I would incur?
Thank you for the question. Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the draft local heritage survey is not a heritage listing. Rather, it's a record of places that are or may become places of cultural heritage significance. Inclusion on the heritage list is a separate process that the City will undertake following adoption of the local heritage survey. Landowners will have the opportunity to provide comment on proposed inclusions in the heritage list. The buildings at number 91 Coode Street has an addition that extends across the property boundary to number 51 Hensman Street. The City recommends that the landowner liaise with the West Australian Planning Commission to lodge an application to subdivide the property to amend the property boundary such that the building can be retained on one freehold title. Once the property is contained on the heritage list, development approval is required prior to demolition occurring. Should a landowner demolish a property without prior approval, the maximum penalty for the individual under the Planning and Development Act is $200,000.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Zombathi, for your questions. I'm now going to check with governance to see if there's any late questions in the tray. No, there's not. Okay. In that case, I'll close public question time at 6:21 p.m. That brings us to item 7, which is confirmation of minutes and notes. Item 7.1 is minutes, and item 7.1.1 is the ordinary council meeting held on 23 July 2024. So I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to move that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting held 23 July 2024 be taken as read and confirmed as a true and correct record. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Navard. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. Then I declare it carried unanimously. Item 7.2 is notes of briefing. I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder that council notes the following council briefings and workshops were held. 7.2.1, concept briefings and workshops. 7.2.2, the council agenda briefing held on 20 August 2024. Could I have a mover? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. A seconder? Councillor Waugh, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. Okay, then I declare it carried unanimously. Item 8.1 is presentations. 8 is presentations. 8.1 is petitions. That's nil this evening. Item 8.2 is gifts or awards presented to council. That's nil for this evening. And item 8.3 is deputations, and a deputation was heard at the council agenda briefing held on 20 August 2024. That brings us to item 9, which is method of dealing with agenda business. And I'll now seek confirmation from the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Mike Bradford, that all the report items contained in tonight's agenda were discussed at the August council agenda briefing. Mr Bradford.
That's correct, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. So, with the exception of those items to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, reports will be adopted by exception resolution. And by this, I mean the officer recommendation will be adopted as is, without discussion or amendment. The following items have been withdrawn for discussion this evening. Item 10.3.1, Local Heritage Survey Review. The reason for that is I've declared a financial proximity and impartiality interest in that item, and also because Councillor Nick Coveney has an amended motion. We've also withdrawn item 10.4.3, entitled Review of Dog Exercise Areas and Prohibited Areas. The reason for that is an absolute majority is required for this item. And we've also withdrawn item 10.4.5, 2024 Western Australian Local Government Association Annual General Meeting, and the reason for that is elected member appointments are required. Councillors, does anyone wish to withdraw any other items for discussion this evening? That's a no? Okay. In that case, I'm about to call for a mover and a seconder to carry the following items by exception resolution. Those items are as follows. Item 10.1.1, Collier Park Golf Course Business Plan. Item 10.1.2, request for tender 8 of 2024, provision of plumbing and gas maintenance services. Item 10.1.3, request for tender 9 of 2024, provision of HVAC and refrigeration maintenance services. Item 10.1.4, Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries Club Nightlights Program 2024/25. Item 10.1.5, Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries CSRFF Small Grants Program 2024/25. Item 10.4.1, Listing of Payments July 2024. Item 10.4.2, Monthly Financial Statements July 2024. And item 10.4.4, Proposed Council Meeting Schedule 2025. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Councillor Prendeville as seconder, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose these items? No. Okay. In that case, those items have just been passed by exception resolution in accordance with clause 5.5 of the City of South Perth Standing Orders Local Law 2007, and the officers' recommendations have been accepted by council. We'll now be moving on to those reports identified to be withdrawn for discussion this evening. The first of which is item 10.3.1, entitled Local Heritage Survey Review. And at this point, because I've declared a financial and proximity interest in this item, I will be vacating the chamber, and so I'll ask Councillor Ward to take my position as presiding member and act as presiding member for the duration of this item. If someone would please come and get me after this item's concluded, and I'll rejoin you then. Thank you all.
Right. Councillors, item 10.3.1 being the Local Heritage Survey Review. A debate on this item was adjourned at the 28th of May Ordinary Council meeting, and at that time Councillor Jennifer Navard had moved the item and Councillor Blake de Souza had seconded the item. Councillor Navard had spoken to the motion and put it to Council to consider. I then called, Councillor Blake de Souza chose not to speak. I then called for anyone to speak against the item, and it was at this point that debate was adjourned. So in accordance with clause 15.2b of the standing orders, debate is to be resumed at the next meeting where it was interrupted. So therefore, does anybody wish to speak against this item? No? Does anybody wish to speak? Oh, Councillor Brandis.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to actually further adjourn this item.
Thank you, Councillor Brandis. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Navard. Councillor Brandis, can you please state your reasons?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I consider this item to be quite a critical item, very important. I was concerned the first time around when this item was raised. I consider that independent external consultants should be engaged with assessing the list of properties that have actually been included in the categories, in particular 1 and 2, and also with regard to identifying whether the assessment process has actually been conducted in a way that is independent and has been vouched by an external party. I think it's a very important process that we do need to actually undertake an independent review. If we look at our peers, they engage with external consultants with regard to this process. The consultation should commence at the beginning of the process, before we actually advertise these items, before it actually goes out to the community. I think we need to actually gain that assurance that a independent review has been conducted initially as opposed to later on in the piece. So for that reason, I'd be in favour of deferring this until an independent external consultant has actually been engaged to undertake that review before this is actually provided to the community for consideration and is advertised. I am also very concerned with regard to the deputation that we heard from Dr. Brogan in regard to our near neighbours, our fellow local governments, where they actually do have identified quite a lot more with regard to properties that would be categorised as a Category 1 or Category 2 property. I'm not too sure if we identify 2 in this process, if that's appropriate, and I would rather an independent expert be considered in this process and this be given the due care that it requires. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brendan-Brandis. So I'm going to put that one to the vote. Councillor Brendan-Brandis, could you just state how long you anticipate the deferral to be?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd require the consultation period to be undertaken thoroughly, so my expectation is at least a 3-month period. Would the administration have any concerns with the 3-month period?
So would you seek for it to be brought back in November or December meeting? It has been brought to my notice, Councillor Brendan-Brandis, that deferring the item doesn't necessarily trigger a review to be undertaken. So
I would allow for 3 months for the review to be undertaken to ensure that it has been undertaken adequately and sufficiently. So my expectation is that this would be brought back in December if we allow 3 months for a review period.
do you have a comment, Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It may be beneficial for Council if I just explain the process for the review as per the Local Heritage Survey guidelines. The first step in the process is to undertake what's known as the call for nominations from the community. So in terms of our review of the Local Heritage Survey, as I provided in response to the questions earlier this evening, the document that we have at the moment has been prepared by Heritage Consultants. What the city has done is gone out for the initial call for nominations to see whether there are any proposed amendments to the existing place records or whether there are any new places that could be considered of cultural heritage significance to include in the draft heritage survey. The next step following that process is council endorsement of the draft document for public consultation. During that process, members of the community and landowners that are affected by the proposed categories will be afforded the opportunity to provide comment on the place listings. And if there is a dispute at that point in time as to the content of the place records, the city would then seek an independent expert heritage consultant to review the information contained within the place record. Following that, the city will then provide a further recommendation back to council for council to consider whether or not it adopts the draft local heritage survey. If at that point in time, council does not agree with the city's recommendation or the advice of the expert heritage consultant, there's a provision under the Heritage Act that says council has the discretion to be able to vary any of the categories contained within the local heritage survey. So at that point in time, council has the opportunity to then adopt that document with any changes following comments received from the community. And the only other piece of advice I'd like to provide is that it's a statutory requirement that council adopts a local heritage survey. If the administration was provided the opportunity for 3 months, that wouldn't be sufficient time to enable us to engage and appoint a heritage consultant to undertake the review of the local heritage survey. The process for that, indicative costs to undertake that body of work is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it would need to go through formal procurement processes.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have a few questions with regard to the comments that we've just received. So with regard to the listed properties, there's been no independent review undertaken on any of those.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the city has retained all of the current categories that are contained in the existing survey that was prepared by a heritage consultant. The only amendments that the city has made to the document is to provide the new place records for those places that we received through the nomination and call for nomination period, and provided a recommendation on what category they should have. And we've updated the terminology throughout the document to reflect the local heritage survey guidelines.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Shaw, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. With regard to the estimated costing in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with the current properties on the list, there aren't that many. So I'm just wondering how that sort of price would equate when we've actually got a small number to consider for an independent review.
Thank you, Ms Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So there's two types of reviews that heritage consultants typically undertake. The first is the general review, which is the process that the city is going through right now, and that's where the quotes come in at a few $100,000. The second is place-specific reviews, and they range between $5,000 and $10,000, depending on the complexity of the place record itself and the amount of research that's required to review the place. The place-specific reviews are the type of reviews that we are intending to engage a heritage consultant for if there is an objection to any of the management categories during the course of public consultation.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Director Shaw, and thank you, Deputy Mayor. So with regard to the other local governments, they do engage with external consultants, and some of them engage up front, so early on in the piece as opposed to later in the piece. So would there not be merit in actually early engagement so that we're actually quite comfortable before we actually send out a list for consultation?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Respectfully, I disagree. That's not the process that is followed. The first step that is taken in the review of a local heritage survey is the call for nominations, and that's in accordance with the local heritage survey guidelines. Some local governments engage a heritage consultant to undertake the entire general review, including the initial call for nominations, and as I mentioned earlier, that's where that figure comes from.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Coveney.
Isn't the bigger issue that a deferral doesn't actually cause the city to go and do a different process? So a deferral doesn't actually achieve, I think, what Councillor Brenda Brandis is seeking.
Yes, I understand. If Councillor Brenda Brandis intends to achieve what he's achieving, I would anticipate that he would move the deferral and then potentially at an intervening meeting move a motion requesting that to occur. Councillor Brenda Brandis, you've now had the opportunity to hear what Director Shaw has said. Oh. Sorry, Councillor Choi.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just before you move on there, I have a couple of questions as well following in between these other questions that were just asked by councillors. So I'm just looking at the guidelines for assessment of local heritage places, and I understand heritage consultants have been appointed and have looked at this already. I'm just wondering, were they external independent or were they from within the city? Because I know that is specified in these guidelines.
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So the document that we're basing our review on has been prepared by the heritage consultants in the past. So we had Hocking Heritage Studio prepare the current document, as in the current version of the local heritage inventory. All the city has done is update that document in light of the new terminology contained in the local heritage survey guidelines and undertake the call for nominations and create the new place records in accordance with those guidelines. But I will also add that our urban planners do have heritage qualifications, so they may not be independent in the sense of preparing the document, but in the sense of reviewing these should an objection be received, we're intending to engage an independent expert heritage consultant.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Brenda Randis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. With regard to the engagement of the external independent consultant, did they undertake a review of the categorisation methodology?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So to clarify, the current version of the local heritage inventory, that was prepared by an external heritage consultant. The management categories that are contained in the draft local heritage survey presented on the agenda tonight are in accordance with the local heritage survey guidelines. The previous version had the old terminology, which was categories A, B, C and D. The new version has categories 1 to 4. The requirement and how it aligns with what the category is given remains unchanged between the old version of the guidelines and the new version of the guidelines.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Brenda Randis.
Thank you, Director Shaw. So just to clarify from my understanding, they didn't review even initially the categorisation methodology, or they did review the categorisation methodology on properties?
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you. They didn't review the categorisation method because that remains the same. What they did is reviewed all of the information related to the place and recommended the place category. So, for example, where a place is contained as category B on the current local heritage inventory, the city has then taken that same place record and presented it as category 2 in the new draft local heritage survey because that's the equivalent. So the city hasn't proposed to change any of the existing categories. All it's done is update the terminology to reflect the guidelines.
Thank you, Director Shaw.
Thank you, Director Shaw. Councillor Brenda Randis, you've now had the benefit of quite a number of questions together with Director Shaw's responses. Do you wish to maintain your amendment, your procedural motion?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
All right, I will put that to the vote then. For all those listening online in the gallery, we are just waiting for the voting system to be put in place. Shall we just vote on this by a show of hands? So all those in favour of the deferral, please raise your hands. That is Councillor Brenda Brandis, Councillor Jennifer Navard, Councillor Mary Choi and Councillor Waugh, and all those against, Councillor Coveney, Councillor Prendeville and Councillor D'Souza. Sorry, could I just clarify the date of the deferral was to...
Until the December meeting.
Okay, December 2024. Thank you. If somebody could please call Mayor Milner back into the room, that would be great. Thank you.
Alrighty. We now turn to item 10.4.3, which is the next item to be withdrawn for discussion this evening, entitled Review of Dog Exercise Areas and Prohibited Areas. We have an officer recommendation before us. I haven't received any amended or alternative motions. Does anyone wish to move the officer recommendation? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Anyone to second? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose this? No. Then I'll simply use my powers under the standing orders to declare it carried unanimously, which satisfies the requirement for an absolute majority. We now turn to item 10.4.5, which is entitled 2024 Western Australian Local Government Association Annual General Meeting. Once again, we do have an officer recommendation before us, but it does require 2 elected members to pop their names down so that we can have a couple of delegates at the Walga AGM. I haven't received any nominations. Does anyone want to put their hand up to be one of the 2 delegates? Councillor Navard, thank you. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. In that case, I'll simply move a motion in line with the officer recommendation that that Council approves the following elected member, singular, to be registered as voting delegate on behalf of the City of South Perth at the 2024 Western Australian Local Government Association AGM to be held on Wednesday, 9 October 2024. Councillor Jennifer Navard. And then paragraph 2, that Council approves the following elected member, singular, as proxy voting. We probably don't need that, do we? No. All right. So we can probably delete paragraph 2. Does anyone want to be a proxy if Councillor Navard can't make it for any reason? I guess not. Okay. In that case, we'll delete paragraph 2 and simply have an amended officer recommendation in terms of paragraph 1, as I read out previously. Does anyone want to second that? Councillor Coveney, thank you. Does anyone oppose? No. In that case, the amended officer recommendation has been passed unanimously. And that brings us to, that closes item 10. That brings us to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. So, Councillor Navard, you were very quick off the mark there. Fire away. What would you like?
I would like September the 2nd to 6th, please. A leave of absence.
All right, so that's the 2nd of September through to the 6th of September, inclusive?
Yes.
All right. Anyone else? Councillor Waugh.
Sorry, can I have Friday the 20th of September?
I haven't got my calendar in front of me.
I think it's Friday the 20th of September through to Sunday the 22nd of September. Thank you.
All right, so Councillor Waugh is the 20th of September to the 22nd of September. Anyone else? No. Okay. So I'm about to move a notice of motion that the leave of absence applications received from Councillor Glenn Cridland for the period of 28 August 2024 to 31 August 2024 inclusive, from Councillor Jennifer Navard for the period of 2 September 2024 to 6 September 2024 inclusive, and from Councillor Bronwyn Waugh for the period of 20 September 2024 to 22 September 2024 inclusive, all be granted. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Councillor Coveney as seconder, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose? No. Okay. Then I'll declare those leave of absence requests or applications all granted. All right. That brings us on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. We have one here, which is item 12.1, a notice of motion from Councillor Nick Coveney, entitled South Perth Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan, Node 2 Coode Street Concept Plan. Councillor Coveney, would you like to move your notice of motion? And if so, I'll see about a seconder.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. My motion reads that Council approves an allocation of $200,000 in the 2025-26 budget towards the preparation of a concept plan for Node 2 Coode Street, as described in the South Perth Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan 2015, consistent with the priorities outlined in the Coode Street Foreshore Engagement Outcomes Report, October 2022.
Thank you. Councillors, would anyone like to second this? Councillor Choi? Councillor Coveney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In 2012, the City commenced a visioning process to guide future activities and development on the foreshore. That process resulted in the Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan of 2015. That plan outlines the findings of extensive community engagement and the strategies and priorities to guide the revitalisation. That plan identifies 10 unique nodes making up the foreshore and the order of priority. The first priority being Menn Street was activated some time ago, and the second priority being Coode Street hasn't been activated. Respectfully, progress should have commenced several years ago, as was recommended by our administration. In this regard, in 2021, the City went to the expense of extensive community engagement in relation to Node 2 specifically. The findings were published in the Engagement Outcomes Report of October 2022. Our administration then recommended that funds be allocated in the annual budget for FY 22-23 for concept plans that reflected the outcomes report. Council at that time voted 5-4 to remove that line item. So here we sit, almost a decade since the plan of 2015, almost 2 years since the outcomes report of 2022, with very little progress towards activating Node 2. It still has a dated playground, dated barbecue facilities, a dated toilet, a dated rowing shed, a dated and unused ferry terminal, a single cafe restaurant and very little shade. So much for the foreshore being our crown jewel. Our community have told us that they want this area to be so much more, but we have not been listening. So the time to act is now. The DBCA recently received an application to construct a new rowing shed at Node 2. Our new local town planning scheme was just adopted, which will result in high density on Angelo Street very close to Node 2. And 2 months ago, Council resolved to include activation of the foreshore in their CEO's KPIs. And just 2 days ago, the state government announced the ferry route would be extended to Applecross and UWA in less than 18 months. Residents want the ferry terminal restored at Node 2, which will reduce congestion at the South Perth Freeway intersection. But we must give the ferry a reason to stop there. The riverfront of the foreshore and other areas around South Perth are being activated, improving the amenity for their residents and stimulating economic activity. The City of Perth transformed the Esplanade Reserve into Elizabeth Quay and have concept plans to transform Langley Park to South Bank. The Burswood Park Board have concept plans to transform Burswood into a public area inspired by Elizabeth Quay. Whilst what is being proposed at Node 2 is not at the same scale, without a concept plan, activation and improvements cannot progress in any meaningful way. Residents will miss out on the associated amenity that they expect and they deserve. To progress with concept plans is not an either-or proposition. You can still deliver services and remain fiscally responsible whilst at the same time improving the amenity for our community. This motion is an investment in our community. It's a blueprint for what we use to obtain external funding. Lastly, for those that haven't read the outcomes report, our community tell us they want more food and beverage options, more shade, better lighting, upgraded playground and toilet facilities, exercise and game areas, improved waterfront access and better public transport connections. Respectfully, these are humble requests and we must start listening.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Councillor Choi, if you'd like to speak as seconder, your opportunity is now.
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. And firstly, I would like to commend this motion and thank Councillor Coveney for bringing it to the floor. So this motion is in line with the 2015 South Perth Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan and subsequent 2022 Coode Street Foreshore Outcomes Report, following the comprehensive community engagement and public consultation on the foreshore for progressing Node 2 of the foreshore plan. Now, I did have some reservations about the timing and necessity, and it also appearing somewhat out of step of the ordinary budget setting process that councillors are generally encouraged to stick to. Notwithstanding that, a new accessible changing places public toilet facility is due to be implemented soon near the Coode Street Playground as part of the city's 24-25 $1.1 million public toilet capital works program. And it is a view that the timeline and impacts from the potential development, approval and subsequent development of the proposed new college rowing shed within the same vicinity on the foreshore, which remains unclear as it pertains to planning for the Node 2 Coode Street works, and that it may be prudent to wait and assess things at that point. But nevertheless, gathering all of it will take time to progress, like this and any development that may take place there with regards to that boat shed. And following my questions at last week's agenda briefing and offline, It appears the city is supportive of the proposed budget allocation, and it was also made quite clear that all capital expenditure can be considered discretionary, with the council able to determine such allocation of funds as and when it deems fit. It has also been indicated that any Node 2 Coode Street plan will not impact on future rates, and since this item must be revisited as part of the June 25 budget deliberations, as I said, I will support it, and I ask the council to please consider the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Councillors, does anyone wish to speak against the notice of motion? Councillor Brenda Brandis. Question, fire away.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Just with regard to some of the comments about the delay in undertaking the Node 2 strategic work, would it be fair to say that a lot of that was delayed due to the recreational aquatic facility centre that was actually in progress over the last few years, which also delayed other projects as well?
Ms Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I believe it was because a budget allocation was previously removed by council, so the city didn't have the funds to undertake the concept plan.
Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Director Shaw. And another question as well. With regard to the comments about the dated transportation system, including the ferry services, to what extent would the city be involved in that? Because I thought that might be more of a state issue.
Mr Bradford.
So I think historically the ferry did operate from Coode Street. I'm not quite sure when it stopped. You will have heard recent announcements by the state government around an expanded ferry service. We have had discussions, admittedly a little while ago, with the state government around their priorities. And I think that the media release on the weekend that talked about Applecross UWA and the existing ferry stops at Main Street and Elizabeth Quay and a few others, I think are the initial priorities. The feedback that I've had from the state government around Coode Street is that there are some issues with the river in that area in terms of, I think, depth, those sorts of things, and an observation that they're targeting areas where population density through infill development is occurring, and they didn't feel at that point that Coode Street was at that level at that point. I think Coode Street would be a stop that might be considered in the future at some point.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Brenda Brandis, another question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just probably the most important part of the question was, to what extent would the city be considering contributing towards any of the infrastructure around the potential ferry?
Mr Bradford, should I send that?
I'll have a go. I think that public transport of the nature of ferries is largely a state responsibility. That would include the ferries themselves, and I would expect the supporting infrastructure to a large extent, unless there was some really good reason why the city would contribute to provide additional amenity or capability specific to the city.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, Councillor Navard, speaking or question?
Question, please.
Fire away.
We do know that it's likely to, if it were to be successful, it'd be a larger footprint, and therefore I'm just wondering about the flow on from that and how that might impact this kind of decision. If someone could explain that, please.
Ms Shaw, can I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the comment period for the revised plans for the Wesley Boat Shed closed on the 7th of July. The next steps in terms of that process is that DBCA's Director General needs to consider all of the submissions received and prepare the final report, and that will be sent to the Minister for Environment for a determination. We don't have an indicative timeframe on when that may occur. However, I would assume such a decision would be made prior to a concept plan being prepared, given the notice of motion is proposing a budget allocation for next financial year, in which case we would factor in the final location of the boat shed into the concept plan.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the notice of motion? Councillor Brenda Brandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Whilst the intent of this motion is actually honourable, it's highly appropriate, I don't think it needs to be now. We conduct a intense budget review every year. That budget review starts in March and it goes all the way through to June. We work through scores of items. We debate, we deliberate in workshops. We consider a lot of items, and there are many items that are worthy of inclusion in the budget. This item is for the 25-26 year. We're in August 2024. This should be a part of budget deliberation workshops for next March, April, May and June. There is no need for this item or any other items to be randomly brought forward and presented to Council outside of the budget period. I appreciate if the items are urgent or currently being considered and need additional funding requirements, but for something that would be part of an ordinary budget process, which is for the 25-26 year, should form part of the discussions along with all the other items considered in that budget deliberation and considered for all the wards. So for that reason, I don't see there to be any need for this item to be specifically excluded, to be the matter of conversation tonight for a future budget. This precedent would create a problem if all councillors were to bring forward items for future budgets and to have them brought in advance. So for this reason, I support the item itself. It's appropriate, not the process and not for bringing forward a budget item ahead of the budget deliberation workshops. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, Councillor De Souza speaking for or against or asking a question?
For, Mr Mayor.
Please, please proceed.
I support this motion by Councillor Coveney. I think it is the right time to bring it forward for two reasons. The first being it's proactive and it provides the administration with a lead time to begin the work on this issue. My own experience in terms of pushing the Manning bike track, it was 2 or 3 years at least between me first flagging that and sort of getting it funded and towards works now. So that's the first reason. I think it provides the lead time required to get the process right. And I know what Councillor Brenda Brennan said, it's not ideal to do it for everything, but for issues of strategic importance like this, I think it's important to flag the intent early. And secondly, I think it's the exact right time, given the state government's recently signalled an openness to review the ferry routes. I think having those announcements and combining that with this work provides the city and the CEO with, I guess, ammunition going forward to lobby for more to be done in that regard. So for those reasons, I support Councillor Coveney's motion.
Thank you, Councillor De Souza. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the notice of motion? Question, Councillor Brenda Abrandis?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question following on from Councillor De Souza's comments with regard to lobbying state government. As part of this strategic imperative, are we considering any aspects that we would be lobbying the state government for?
Who should I send that to, Mr Bradford?
We have been advocating for projects with the state and federal government consistent with our strategic community plan, and the particular priorities around that include improved public transport, and we think that there is opportunity for a number of options within improved public transport. Obviously, South Perth train station, improved bus services, but the one we've been highlighting is that we support the improved ferry services, and in particular we've just been signalling our desire to work with the state government on improved ferry services, and we know that they have been targeting around the Canning Bridge area and Men Street, but we'd be willing to work with them on whatever the options are to get better ferry service, which equals better public transport, which we know that we need.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the notice of motion who hasn't already spoken? No? Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favour who hasn't already spoken? No. Okay. Councillor Coveney, if you'd like to wind up rebutting any arguments that have been made against during the course of the debate, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I honestly couldn't have said it better than Councillor D'Souza. Really, this is about flagging an intention to the state government and to our community that we're dead serious about this, and the time is now.
Thank you, Councillor Coveney. Now, councillors have been advised by governance that the voting system using our consoles isn't working, so we're going to do this by a show of hands. Those in favour of the notice of motion, please raise your hands. All right, have we got that, governance? All right, so just for the benefit of the tape, those in favour are myself, Mayor Milner, Councillor Coveney, Councillor Choi, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Waugh and Councillor D'Souza. Those against, please raise your hands. Councillor Navard and Councillor Brenda Brandis. The motion has been carried. All right. That brings us to item 13, which is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. Responses to questions from members taken on notice at the July 2024 Ordinary Council meeting can be found in the appendix of this agenda. And that brings us to item 13.2, which is questions from members. Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a few questions tonight. The first one is, can the City please advise when the proposed option to lease the Collier Park Reserve to the Wasps Hockey Club is coming back to Council for a vote?
Mr Adams.
So I was actually speaking to our lawyers today. So WASP have provided us with some amendments that they would like to see in the lease document that we provided to them, the lease and option document we provided to them. Our lawyer has been considering the impacts of those amendments and will be providing us with advice on them in the next couple of days. Pending the lawyer's advice, then we'll look to discuss those proposed amendments with WASP again, and hopefully we will have a resolved position where we can put something to council for the September meeting. If not, it will more than likely go to the October meeting, but I'm hopeful that we'll have something to bring to council for the September meeting.
Thank you, Mr Adams. Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Mr Adams. And just on that, has the City received any further updates from Hockey WA regarding the Perth Hockey Stadium?
Ms Shaw, should I send that in your direction?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We have received some further information with regards to the design of the facility. So I think it would probably be appropriate if Hockey WA presented to council with any updates they have on the facility, so the city can arrange that.
Councillor D'Souza.
And just one more question, and this is on the CCTV rebate item, which was in the councillor bulletin. I read with interest, noting that the highest uptake was in South Perth and Como, and there's, I guess, lagging uptake for the program in Carrawara and Salter Point. I guess the first question is, what does the city think can be done to, I guess, highlight the program a bit more in those areas with low uptake?
Should I send that one to Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So usually what happens with the rebate program, we're finding that neighbours are speaking to each other, and so where one person has made an application, they let their neighbours know, and that's why we're starting to see groupings of applications from certain suburbs. We promote it through our Community Safety Advisory Group, and certainly encourage elected members to let it be known that we have that program. In the past, we have provided social media updates to detail that we have the program, but it's proving so popular that we're receiving multiple applications without further advertising the campaign. So I think at this point in time, we'll keep continuing to process the applications that we have until the funds are exhausted. If we do require a further budget allocation, then we can seek some funding from council.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillor D'Souza.
Thank you, Ms Shaw, and thank you, Mr Mayor. And just one further question on that same item. So is it effectively a rolling year-round program, and how soon do you expect the funds to be exhausted from that program?
Ms Shaw?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The program has been quite successful, so we are intending to continue with the program. That would obviously be subject to council making a budget allocation each financial year to support the program. In terms of the uptake, as I said, it's been quite popular. It's difficult to predict how quickly the funds will be exhausted, but if we do need a further allocation, then as I said, we'll come back to council.
Thank you, Ms Shaw. Councillors, Councillor Prendeville.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to inquire if we have any updates on the Kensington Underground Power, please.
Ms Anne Primo, can I send that your way?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll take that on notice.
Councillor Choi.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, does the city keep a record of derelict land and properties in the district? And if so, what does it do with that information, please?
Ms Shaw, is that one I can send your way? Or someone else?
I'm not sure we have a record of derelict properties. We only have records of vacant land, and so we don't have a record of derelict properties. We typically deal with issues associated with derelict properties through a compliance when we receive complaints. I do note that there are a number of those properties on the Canning Highway which are actually owned by Main Roads or the Planning Commission, and we're in relatively constant contact with them around ensuring that they look after their properties.
Thank you, Mr Bradford. Councillor Choi?
Thanks through the Chair to Director Shaw and CEO Bradford. Does the city have a tree plan for its public open spaces? And if so, can this be made available on the hub for elected members, please?
A tree plan, I think Councillor Choi said.
Do you like
a tree plan or a tree planting plan or any sort of plan?
TREE, tree plan?
Tree planting plan? Tree plan?
Ms Anne Primo?
Yeah, no, we don't have such a thing.
Councillor Choi?
Thanks again through the Chair to Director Anne Primo. Is the city planning to install or to recommend to Council to install any further shade on the Esplanade end of the South Perth foreshore before summer arrives, please?
Ms Anne Primo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. There's no nothing in the programme, the works programme, to install shade in that area.
Mr Bradford?
We do have a workshop next week on foreshore activation where shade will be one of the topics to be discussed.
Any further questions, councillors? No. Okay. That brings us to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. That's nil this evening. Item 15 is when we would close the meeting to the public if there was any reason to do so, but there's not, so we won't. And that brings us to item 16, which is closure. So before I close this meeting, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation this evening. I close this meeting at 7:13 p.m. Thank you all and good night.